This is Live from the Heartland. I'm Lisa Smith, your host for today. We're broadcasting from WLUW 88.7. And my next guest is going to give us an update on what's happening with the environmental legislation. Obama was campaigned as a very pro-environment candidate, and I know that he's got a lot of programs that he's trying to push. But Max Mueller is here from Environment Illinois. You're the program director for Environment Illinois. Thank you for coming, Max.
Thank you very much.
Just tell us, basically, I know that during the Bush administration, it was bad. I mean, the EPA was gutted.
That's right. I mean, I think it's probably going to take years to undo
a
lot of the damage that was done to existing environmental laws in this country during the Bush administration. And, while President Bush was president from 2000 to 2008, we really a scientific consensus emerged around global warming,
which his administration denied.
Well, yeah, exactly. There's also been increased concern about toxic chemicals, industrial chemicals, and their people's exposure to them and the effects they're having on people's health and their links to chronic health problems. But just like global warming, there was really no forward movement towards policy solutions for those issues. And in fact, it seemed like the Bush administration was trying to actively deconstruct as many of them as they could.
Well, also, didn't he not pretty much gut the Environmental Protection Agency? I mean, I thought that they had, and also installed people there who were not environmentalists. That was my understanding. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, there's some very good examples of what you're talking about. Replacing regulators with former lobbyists for the industries they regulated. Those stories there are many stories like that went from the Bush administration. One thing in particular that the Bush administration that got a lot worse during the Bush administration was the Clean Water Act, and right now.
How does that get worse, by the way?
Well, let me explain what I mean. Back in the 1970s, the Great Lakes were kind of the poster child for why we needed a law to protect clean water in this country.
So you couldn't set it on fire by tossing a match in it, but it was pretty bad.
Well, I mean, the Cuyahoga River that flows north into Cleveland or through Cleveland into Lake Erie actually did catch fire. It was on the cover of Time magazine, and that really galvanized the American public to finally do something about industries which up until that time had been using waterways in the United States as their dumping ground for chemicals and industrial waste. And there was finally will in the early 70s to do something about clean water, and Congress passed the Clean Water Act. And this is a huge bill with thousands of pages of subsequent administrative rules that were made to enforce it. It's a big, big thing, but it boils down to a very simple and elegant idea. And the idea is that waterways in this country are a shared resource. They're not a dumping ground. And if you...
They're the public commons.
What's that?
They're the commons.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. They don't belong to you or to me. They belong to everyone. And no one has the right to spoil them for everybody else. And the Clean Water Act set a goal of eliminating toxic discharges into American waterways by 1985, completely eliminating them. There would be no more toxic discharges by 1985. And it set an interim goal of saying that all waterways in the country have to be safe for fishing and safe for swimming by 1983.
All waterways.
All waterways.
It's a pretty big order.
It is, and it's kind of amazing. Like, I don't think that today we could pass a bill like this.
No.
This was a bill that was opposed by home builders associations, by the Farm Bureau, which represents agribusiness, and by industrial polluters, people who don't want to have their pollution regulated, and they are.
Because it costs them money.
Well,
when it's regulated, when they have to dispose of it,
they would rather be able to just, get rid of it easily.
Right, it's cheaper.
So, the Clean Water Act faced lots of opposition, but it was passed into law in 1972, and it has done a decent job of solving the problem of industrial pollution into our waterways. Now, it hasn't met its goals. Its goal was by 1980.
I would challenge that statement.
By 1985, the goal was all waterways, or by 1983, all waterways fishable and swimmable. Right now in this country, about 50% of the waterways don't meet those goals, and only a small percentage, around 20%, have actually been tested to see if they meet those goals. So of the waterways we know about half of them don't meet the goal. However, big bodies of water like the Great Lakes are much cleaner than they were. And
except for the zebra mussels and the
that's a different issue. That's
mussels and
invasive species, and we still don't have a good
we
system
got invasive species problems,
for protecting against invasive species. But the Clean Water Act did a lot to clean up water quality in the Great Lakes since the 70s. And the problem that happened in the last 8 years was there were a couple of Supreme Court cases that confused how policymakers were interpreting the Clean Water Act. And then the Bush administration took the worst possible interpretation and basically made it the law of the land. And
what would that worst interpretation be?
Well,
in a nutshell.
So for 30 years, people had read the Clean Water Act as protecting all surface waters in the United States. If you wanted to pollute, you couldn't just do it. You had to get a permit, and the permit would make sure that your pollution, when added up with all the other polluters' pollution into this waterway, wouldn't make it unsafe for fishing and swimming.
Okay, so what did the Bush administration interpret it as?
Well, here's what happened. The Bush administration basically, in reaction to a couple of Supreme Court cases which threw the scope of the Clean Water Act into doubt, they kind of implemented the worst possible interpretation. The result is that waterways, source waters, small wetlands, streams that are smaller or more isolated or don't flow all year are no longer protected by the Clean Water Act. And the situation is that EPA simply won't enforce the Clean Water Act. So say there's a polluting industry located on a waterway that is of the type that no longer is protected by the Clean Water Act. When their permit expires in 5 years, they'll go to get a new one and they'll be told they don't need it, that their pollution is no longer regulated. Or a new facility could be built and they wouldn't be subject to getting a Clean Water Act pollution permit. And so this is a real huge rollback in one of the most significant environmental protections in our country.